Mr. Colleagues, international experts. I'm sorry not to be there with you this morning, but I'm really pleased to be able to address this very timely international symposium organized by STEPI with a recorded intervention. So, as we all know, we're living unprecedented times, and the COVID-19 pandemic has generated the worst health, economic, and social crisis of our lifetime. And science, technology, and innovation are the only way out. Across the world, universities, public research institutes, pharmaceutical and biotech firms have rapidly engaged in R&D to develop new treatments and vaccines for COVID-19, often in collaboration across organizations and borders, and often employing artificial intelligence to learn more about the virus and speed up the development of the vaccines. Meanwhile, much of the work went online, accelerating a digital transformation that has been underway for decades. E-learning, teleworking, e-commerce, e-health have become the new normal, and firms across the world have adopted digital business models to maintain operations and preserve some revenue flows, while mobile applications were developed to help track and trace the spread of the virus. Today, I would like to share with you some of the key findings and messages of our forthcoming Science, Technology, and Innovation Outlook. The report has a subtitle that you can see up on the screen, Times of Crisis and Opportunity, and I would like to stress the word opportunity. So our Science, Technology, and Innovation Outlook has three main storylines. The first, the COVID-19 pandemic has been a period of unprecedented and rapid mobilization of the STI community. We have seen an outpour of ideas and policy experimentation. Second, the pandemic has underscored the fundamental importance of science and technology as an essential element of both having a resiliency to address external shocks and generate a response. Third, our system has been under stress. So this has exposed gaps and weak spots. And we really think there is an opportunity to reset STI policies and direct science and innovations towards more sustainable and inclusive futures. Let me go through these different stories. So our research has estimated that in the first few months of the pandemic, national research funding bodies worldwide spent around $5 billion on emergency funding for COVID-19 R&D. You can see the figure up there. At least $550 million was allocated by philanthropic foundations, the green part, to COVID-19 research during this period, on top of their pledges to major international cooperative initiatives, the gray part. In the second half of the 2020, the red dashed line, national research funders have increasingly integrated calls for COVID-19 R&D into traditional mainstream funding mechanisms, which makes their identification and measurement more difficult. Are these investments being made at the expense of funding for other disciplines? And if so, of what scale? The jury is still out for that. The flip side to widespread engagement of the research community in designing solutions to COVID-19 is the risk of diverting research efforts indiscriminately away from non-COVID-19 related topics. Now, it is still early to discern the impact, but the amount of scientific output generating in these first few months of the pandemic is staggering. Around 70,000 scientific publications on COVID-19 were published between January and October 2020, and the United States accounts for the largest share, followed by China, the UK, and Italy. We have seen an acceleration of slow-moving trends. Research databases and scientific publishers have removed paywalls so that the scientific community could quickly share COVID-19 related data and publications. Preprints, that is academic papers that have not been peer-reviewed or published yet, have become more common in the medical research field, allowing for faster diffusion of scientific findings, but also raising risks around research quality. you would notice that in the case of COVID-19 related publications, 76% of those are open access, and you can compare that figure with the figure related to dementia. Only 40% are open access publication, or diabetes, 43%. These developments mark important changes and could accelerate the transition to more open science in the long run. We've also seen the impact on how science is conducted. We have run a survey, the Science Flash survey, and 3/4 of scientists who responded to this survey indicated they had shifted to working from home. Many scientists, 40% of the cases, and especially women, experience a reduction in their time for research as a consequence of the pandemic crisis. As we have seen in many walks of life, in the work, schools, and shopping, the pandemic has accelerated the digital transformation that was already underway. Again, our surveys tell us that around 2/3 of scientists have experienced or expect an increase in the use of digital tools for research. Similarly, the private sector has delivered a wide range of innovative solutions to help cope with the health emergency and emerge from it as robustly as possible. Many firms have developed responding the use of digital technologies to maintain operations, and the biopharmaceutical industry, often in partnership with academia, has launched hundreds of clinical trials targeting COVID-19 drugs and vaccines. Here, your figure you see is about vaccines. Academic startup companies have also played a significant role in these efforts. So, clearly, the COVID-19 crisis has disrupted the normal functioning of innovation systems. As you know, and you've seen historically on an aggregate basis, business investment in research and innovation are pro-cyclical. So when the cycle goes down, so do investments in R&D and innovation, and they tend to contract in times of crisis. This crisis, though, might be different. It's too early to tell. But we have put together some data using company balance sheets, and we're seeing that some of the companies that are actually R&D intensive are doing pretty well in terms of revenues, but also in terms of spending in R&D. So the issue is, could COVID-19 be an accelerator of R&D and innovation, or could the crisis exacerbate the gaps in business research and innovation activities between leading and laggard sectors, large and smaller firms, and geographical areas? So, having explored the impacts of the COVID-19 crisis on the STI system very briefly, we got to the point of the third story. So what about the future? And we have seen that, STI has been at the center to the response to the crisis with digital technologies and mobilization. But what about STI being able to do even more for enhancing societal and economic resilience? There are challenges out there. This is not the first one and the last one. There is a climate, for example, emergency. And so there is an opportunity to embrace a sustainability agenda. So this is what we are faced with now, whether the COVID-19 is really a disruptive moment that we can use to address more aggressively societal challenges using STI policy, or whether we will go back to business as usual once this crisis have passed. So many governments view the pandemic as a stark reminder of the need to transition to more sustainable and equitable and resilient society. And I think also the Korean government has taken very visionary and bold initiatives to go towards these more sustainable futures. So in many countries, recovery packages include expenditures for R&D, and so science and innovation will be essential to promote and deliver such transitions. But since the pandemic has exposed limits in research and innovation systems, we really need to address these gaps. Otherwise, this will prevent the realization of these sustainable futures. There is a need, we think, to reset STI policies to better equip governments with the instruments and capabilities to direct innovation efforts towards the goal of sustainability, inclusivity, and resiliencies. Across the OECD, many recovery packages include R&D expenditures, as we said. Many of these are emphasizing the sustainability, resilience, and inclusivity as central themes, and this calls for direct support. But at the same time, the R&D support policy mix has shifted towards greater resilience on tax compared to direct support. You can see it here in this slide from the year 2000, how the blue line, the upward blue line, which is the one on indirect support to R&D through tax incentives, and how this is in contrast with the dark blue line, which has been going down since the global financial crisis of 28-29, and that's the direct support to R&D. So there is this gap. Our policy mix is really skewed towards indirect tax incentives relative to direct ones. Why? Well-designed direct measures for R&D are certainly better suited to support longer-term high-risk research and target innovation that either generate public goods, like health in this case, or have a high potential for knowledge spillovers. So now government indebtedness is much higher than what it was during the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. And OECD projections show it's expected to rise sharply over the next year or so as governments step in to protect their economies. There are uncertainties regarding the future research funding after the crisis. Then, on the one hand, the emerging economic crisis could trigger significant cuts in public research and innovation budgets, so reducing research and innovation capabilities for many years to come. We're not seeing signs of that as yet, but the post-global financial crisis of 2008 and 9 just points in this direction. On the other hand, the pandemic may underline the importance of science and innovation for being both prepared and reactive to upcoming crises, which could translate to stronger support for research and innovation in the longer term. We simply do not know yet. We are at a turning point. Now, the crisis has underscored the importance of the need for transdisciplinary approaches so as to tackle complex weak problems like the pandemics. But the research system is still ill-adapted to this need. So disciplinary and hierarchical structures need to be adjusted to enable and promote transdisciplinary research that engages different disciplines and sectors. And just when we need STEM skills professionals more than ever, we're actually seeing, and we're analyzing that in the STI outlook, we're seeing an increase in precarity of early career professionals, many of whom are employed on short-term contracts with no clear perspective of a permanent academic position. And the pandemic is expected to make matters worse. Those are the results, again, of the OECD Science Flash survey. New incentives and measures for evaluating both individuals and collective contributions to science need to be put in place to support these alternative career options, including channeling this expertise to other sectors. Now, this figure instead tells you that the global pandemic really necessitates a global response. Here we map country of origins of the research on COVID-19 and shows the United States and the China hub and all the links across countries. So our main message here is the science depends on global knowledge commons. And to maintain these, governments really need to build trust and define commons and shared values to ensure a level playing field for scientific cooperation and an equitable distribution of benefits. So we can see that much of the international collaboration is actually driven by scientists themselves. So it is bottom up. But for challenges like COVID-19, there is also need for top-down coordination, as no single country can beat the pandemic on its own, and this will not be the last of the global challenges. We need to recognize that the speed with which research groups and biopharmaceutical firms are developing the vaccines builds on, first, years of basic research investment, second, on recent institutionalization of international coordination efforts, particularly the establishment of the STEPI in 2017 to develop agile technology platforms that can be activated as new pathogens emerge. Here the figure shows the partners in the ACT Accelerator, which is a global collaboration to accelerate development, production, and equitable access to COVID-19 tests, treatment, and vaccines. So these relatively new arrangements are performing well and should be scaled up and extended to other global challenges where R&D preparedness for crisis is important, capitalizing on the momentum for the response to COVID-19. To conclude, we see a lot of uncertainties, so that will shape the impacts that the crisis is having on the STI system, and also will shape the contribution that the STI system can make to solving society global challenges. So the course of uncertainty is shaped by choices. And in most cases, governments can choose the direction to take to avoid some obviously bad options and pursue more promising ones. We are really at the turning point, and it's really up to governments to decide which way to go. Then governments to do this need to possess those dynamic capabilities to be able to adapt and learn in the face of rapidly changing conditions. So I really hope that the symposium today and the discussion will help us share experiences on how to do that, how to go beyond the COVID-19 crisis and make our society a better future. Thank you so much for your attention, and have a great debate and discussion. Thank you.